Heya and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So in this video I'd like to go over how to build a tank. This will be a guide which should encompass all of the builds for the different tanks, from your paladin to your fighter and even your barbarian. They should all be relatively similar. And this guide will show you how to maximize your survivability so you can take as many hits as possible. However, I shall not go over the specific powers which you should use on your specific class, as this is more of a guide. And I also won't really touch on what offense stats you should be using to hold aggro best, because that is very dependent on what content you're running, what kind of place you are within the game, and what other party members you're running with. But I shall mention a few tips that I advise that can help with that a lot. So initially, let's start things off with what stats you should have on your tank build. The way you should prioritize it is like this. You should maximize your hit points as high as it can go. However, there is one statistic that you may want to prioritize over this. If you are generally doing boss fights, like in a trial where you always have to fight just one boss or two, and those bosses now have 100% combat advantage damage against you, and combat advantage will deal 90% more damage to you. So to mitigate this combat advantage damage that enemies deal to you, you want to stack your awareness, and the more awareness you have, the more effective it is, and therefore it is best to make sure you get this as high as possible. So the priority for a tank is to build up awareness to as high as you can. And from there, then look at just maximizing your hit points. Everything else kind of wants to take a back seat, but you want to make sure after stacking as much hit points, you stack defense. There are lots of areas at which you can't stack hit points, so you just stack defense in those other areas. You may get overcapped in awareness, as I am here a little bit, and you can then reduce it a little bit and up your hit points more, or if you can't, then you would do your defense. As a last thing, you would then look at critical avoidance. Now for deflect and deflect severity, I really wouldn't worry about it whatsoever, as it is quite unreliable. You're only going to deflect attacks at a chance based on what you have here, up to 90%. So if you have a 90% chance to deflect an attack, and if you don't deflect, let's say it would kill you, what's the point in having any of that deflect when there is still that chance it's going to kill you? You're better off stacking stats which you know are going to prevent you from getting one shot. Priority is awareness, then hit points, then defense, and then critical avoidance. So those are your stats. Now let's move on to the gear that you should be using as a tank. For gear, you want to be running the highest item level pieces that you can manage to obtain. However, on one side of that, there are some pieces which are going to be better than others, but they will all have similar pretty high item level. Because the higher item level you have, the more hit points you will obtain. From this formula, as you can see right here, your base maximum hit points is your total item level multiplied by 10. And then for tanks, we gain a 20% extra bonus. Now this is not the only thing that contributes to your maximum hit points, as there are other things like our constitution score. Now the gear that I am running is not overly the best gear. What I would change if I could is I would go and change my feat slot to the wisps of the Shadow Demon. Whenever you receive a critical hit, there is a chance you will gain 3% more of your defense stat and 20% more hit points. This is an insane buff. And with us no longer being able to reduce the chance that enemies critically hit us, meaning these boots are a whole lot more beneficial. We no longer have to just rely on us getting critically healed for this to proc, meaning it will proc a whole lot more often, and these are by far the best boots you should be using as a tank. As for the headpiece, or swapping out one of your rings, I highly recommend using either the Manticore's Mane. This is a helm piece which has the exact same bonus as this Tanner's Ring does, the Manticore's Mane Bite, where whenever you use a daily power, the next enemy that attacks you will take damage equal to 50% of your maximum hit points. This is a huge buff for dealing damage on a tank because it's based on our hit points. The more hit points we have, the more damage we deal. So this Manticore's main bite is what you ideally want to be using when you're going into a boss fight and you need to make sure you're holding that aggro. You use initially your big damaging power and you again get this massive buff to your aggro threshold at the very beginning. If you have artifacts up at that time and you increase the effectiveness, you will also increase the effectiveness of how much damage this deals. The very top set that you want to be running as a tank is this Mastered Lichstone set. Now, you don't have to run it, right? You don't need to go invest the AD to get it. There are much cheaper options, much cheaper alternatives. Let's say like the Reflective Armament set, where you have the reflective collar, you have the mirror plated belt, and you have the erratic drift globe. It's a decent set. When you use the daily power, you'll increase your defense and you'll reduce the incoming damage. But the reason I'm running with this Mastered Lichstone set is because the amount of bonus it gives to my constitution score. You can see the waist set gives a +4 and the neck set gives a +5. Nearly all neck sets give +5 anyway, so that's nothing special there. It's mainly just the waist set giving a +4 to con. And you can see my constitution is 34. And this gives me a 17% extra bonus to my maximum hit points. So that's pretty much it for gear. Just stack as high item level as you can. You can see I'm running with these shielded defender vambraces. They will help out just a really tiny bit, giving me that extra damage reduction. And also I'm using the Lionheart set, which will also help give me that extra damage reduction when my stamina is lower. As for artifacts, you definitely want to be running with the Storyteller journals. They will give you the most benefit to you giving you maximum hit points. Aside from that, you just want to be running these artifacts like the Golden Memories, the Hallister's Blast Scepter, those kind of artifacts that have high item level and will give you a buff to your hit points. So now we move on to companions. Companions will hugely benefit you in your survivability. First up, we're going to talk about the Summoned Companion. As a Summoned Companion for a tank, the Ion Stone of Allure is actually the best augment companion you could use, as it gives you a buff to your awareness, your control resistance, and your hit points, thus making it overall the best, because we need as much of that awareness stat as we can get, and also as much hit points as we can get, as those are the top two priorities for building up a tank. As for using other companions, sure, we as a tank can definitely take the sacrifice and run with a companion which might buff up our party's damage, like the Spine Devil or the Stalwart Lion, or we could even use a healing companion like the Dedicated Squire, the Hellmite Paladin Ghost, things like that. I've made some other videos, I'll link them at the end of this video and in the cards. Now we move to companion equipment. Now ideally, again as I stressed before, you want to be stacking awareness, and after awareness, when that's done, you want to stack hit points, but because our companion equipment can't actually give hit points, we stack defense. So what I have for my equipment is I have these double stats of defense and awareness. You could alternatively, of course, use just ones that have single stats of single defense and single awareness. You'll do just as fine. And you can see in my runestones, I'm mainly just using empowered runestones for that hit points. Yes, they now actually grant us hit points, which is hallelujah great. Alternatively than that, I'm also using some recondite to give me awareness to make sure I have that maxed out. You want to get that rating to this orange value so it's red and gives you that maximum 50% from the rating. You can see both my defense and my awareness are like that. Then we move to our passive bonuses from our companions. Now, of course here you want to be ideally using your redemption. However, a lot of people will want you to be using armor break, as it will help deal more damage against a target. So you might have to take the sacrifice instead of using redemption and use armor break. Redemption has now been buffed up, so it actually heals you for a significant amount, whereas before it was really puny. In our offense slot, we ideally want to be running with a blink dog. I know, I said before, stacking deflect and critical avoidance isn't important. Well, as a offense companion, this is the only companion that's going to give you bonuses to 2 defense stats. Sure, we could run a companion which would give us more awareness and an offense stat. But overall, if you look at it, it's not going to give you as much survivability as just stacking 2 defense stats like deflect and critical avoidance. So it's better to use the blink dog. Of course, alternatively, you can just stack some hit points in there, or you could stack something that gives you awareness. It's going to give you a little bit less survivability, but it's not going to make a huge difference, and I wouldn't invest a ton just to get the blink dog and then upgrade it to max. Now in our first universal slot, you can put the Harper Bard. It gives you hit points and awareness, both of the stats which we have to number 1 prioritize. Then we go to our actual defense stat. In here I have the War Dog, and it gives us awareness and defense. Both stats are pretty good. There's nothing else that's going to give us awareness and hit points anymore, so we have to resort to giving us awareness and defense. So the War Dog does that, as well as the Frost Mimic, giving the same bonus there. We have it in our other universal slot. And then in our final utility slot, I have the Owl, giving hit points and awareness. Alternatively, of course, you could use the Energon that just gives you 30,000 hit points. It's going to have a little bit less buff to your survivability, so that's companions. Now we'll move on to our mounts. Initially, in our current tab here, you want to be running with something like the Bat Swarm. It will buff up your survivability by reducing the target's outgoing damage, reducing their critical chance, and on top of that, increasing the damage that the target takes, along with increasing your own damage, meaning it's good for aggro. Overall, just the best combat power for buffing. Alternatively, of course, you could use something that would give you more survivability. Let's say like the Orlant Armament to give you that extra shield when you need it. There's many other combat powers there, but I highly recommend the Bat Swarm if nobody else in your party is using it, because they won't stack up. Then in our equip power, yes, you want to be using Stalwart, as it will give you more hit points. Basically, wherever you can stack hit points, you try and do so, as long as you have awareness capped. Then we go to the stable. Now in the stable, we have our insignias, our insignia bonuses, and our mount collars. Now for our actual insignias, I highly recommend stacking Fortitude insignias. They give you a benefit to both defense and hit points. There's no other insignias that are going to give you buff to your hit points like this, along with giving a good defense stat, so I highly recommend these. Now for the actual insignia bonuses, you ideally want to be running ones that will help you heal. So I have pretty much all of the ones you can obtain there. Knight's Rebuke, whenever you receive combat advantage you heal. Champion's Return, when you reduce to 50% you heal. Barbarian's Revelry, when you crit you heal. Survivor's Blessing, whenever you deflect you heal. And Oppressor's Reprieve, whenever you're stunned, knocked, immobilized, you also heal. Then for our mount collars, there's only a few here which are actually going to benefit you in survivability. However, they all will benefit you by giving you more item level, which equals more hit points. So first we just have gold gain, doesn't matter which one you have here. Then here we have our sturdy one, and this one I have as encounter damage, as I have my smite, which does a significant amount of damage, and buffing that up at the start of a fight can be pretty beneficial. However, that can vary across tanks. For a fighter, you might want to have the one buffing to at-wills. Then for our supportive one, I have stamina regen, so we can get that shield up better. And for my unified, I have incoming healing, and also in our wayfaring one, we just have AP gain. It doesn't particularly matter which one you have here, but the more action points we have, the more dailies we can cast. So that's it for mounts. Now we move to boons. In our boon section here, again, you just want to be stacking as much hit points as possible, and we may as well stack all of the defense stats we can here. Then for the rest, I just have in movement speed. You have some in deflect severity here, also some control resistance, and then damage resistance and damage against like demons and also against some undead. For tier 5, you have Forte. Forte I actually didn't mention before, but it's going to benefit you by primarily giving you more defense percentage, and then it depends on your actual class. But they're going to give you an offense stat, and they're also going to give you a secondary defense stat. For a paladin, it's deflect severity. Then for our secondary tier 5, I'd like to take the stamina regen. Of course, instead of Forte, you could just take like Call of Power to gain more action points. For our master boon, unfortunately, focused retaliation was nerfed, that no longer you can retaliate damage to your target anymore. It will just literally increase your control resistance, your deflect chance, and also your deflect severity. The rest of them here are pretty useless and are not really going to buff you much at all, but you might want to take Bloodlust for some more damage and more action point gain. As for Stronghold Boons, offense doesn't really matter, take what you can. Defense, you ideally want to take that hit points. And utility, if you're going into a long fight where you might die, definitely take Revive Sickness, as that will reduce the effect that skulls have on you. So you won't lose as much hit points and you won't lose as much damage. Back to gear, I didn't mention actually the enchantments I'm running, so I'm going to put that in here. Now, in most of our defense enchantment slots, I'm running with those radiants. Nothing new here. More hit points the better, but if you need awareness, make sure to slot in a tactical or two. You can also see on these rings and also my neck and waist set, I'm running with awareness jewels, giving me that 880 awareness. This is actually a really big buff. It will also buff your item level a little bit, as they do have that. Not sure if they will be adjusted, but that is what it currently stands. For offense stats, it really doesn't matter. Ideally, you would run a Tenebrous enchantment to give that little bit boost in damage, and otherwise, you can go in a stack Radiance as long as your power is not already capped. For our armor enchantment, I highly recommend an Elven Battle, especially when you're in boss fights, as it will give you that extra stamina regen, and it will also give you that extra resistance against slows, immobilizes, disables, and stuns. Alternatively, you could run the Negation enchantment. This basically gives you stacks of damage resistance, and this has actually recently been buffed up, so that each stack will now give you a 4% increase to your damage resistance. However, the downside to this is the stacks only last 3 seconds, so you'll need a boss or enemies to hit you at least within every 3 seconds. If it's over 3 seconds, your stacks all expire. You're able to get these stacks upward to 10 times, meaning from this negation enchantment you could get 40% extra damage resistance, which is huge. And when you're in a mob environment where you have lots of enemies and they're all hitting you at once, this will be amazing. You'll get all those stacks up. The drawback is when you get those stacks to 10, it will expire after 3 seconds, and then you'll have to stack up those stacks again. But overall, this is like a 20% increase to damage reduction. Let's say you would have 5 of these stacks up, average most of the time. But in boss fights, it's pretty much useless, as there's barely any boss that's going to hit you that often. But I will talk more about it in another video. For our weapon enchantment, I highly recommend a Bronzewood. Alternatively, of course, when you're fighting lots of mobs, you could run with a lightning enchantment. A lightning enchantment will just help you deal that damage to other targets which you might not have hit, and thus you might gain the aggro on them before they aggravate some other of your allies, and that way they'll hit you instead. As for utility enchantments, yes, definitely take those dark enchantments for Forte. If you think you need the extra survivability, or you just want to help the healer out a bit more, stack tactical enchantments as we did before and get more of this incoming healing. Last but not least, what buff food am I using to get these statistics? With my long duration buffs, I'm running with the Full Hammer's Favor elixir, as this is pretty much the best elixir out there, buffing up your deflect severity by a whole amount of 10%. Then you have your Caprice. Your Caprice is going to buff up your hit points by a huge amount. It's going to be about 40,000, depends on your initial amount of hit points. And it will also increase your deflect chance. Then we have Sated. We have this from our actual chocolate, and I'm using the chocolate guild food to buff up my hit points and also my awareness. And then we also have the Visage of Dendor. Now this Visage is this chain of scales, and this chain of scales, I can activate it again, will give me this awareness, and then it will give me a secondary stat of one of the following. It'll be either offense, defense, etc. Some of them are actually quite nice there. However, this will actually be reduced. This is reduced down to 3% instead of 6%, which is unfortunate, but it's still going to make the best belt item we can use as a tank. More awareness, the more survivability, the better we are at staying alive. So currently with myself fully buffed up, I actually got defense from the chain of scales there. So when this procs from my ring up, I'm capped out on my defense, which is pretty nice. It 90% there, as you can see, and my awareness is 73%. Now, all tanks now have this power where, as paladins, we have this divine protector which will grant you awareness. All of the tanks have this ability where they can use a daily power which will buff up their awareness, and this divine protector on the paladin will give us 30% more awareness, meaning I only need to get my awareness to actually 60%. And at 60%, when I use that daily, then I will have my awareness capped out. So sometimes it might not be beneficial to bother getting your awareness all the way to what I have, 73%. 73% is great. I'm only 17% away from the cap, meaning I take a lot less damage than somebody with only like 50% awareness. So that's going to be everything for this tank video. If I've missed anything, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And hopefully I presented this well, and if I did, consider leaving the video a like. And if you're new around here, consider subscribing. And we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.